this computer. Boom. And how convenient is that? I press record and a new song starts. So it's like we haven't been listening to that music the whole time. So I'm super curious what this is going to look like uploading to Yonder YouTube with a shared screen. Never done that before. So welcome to the experiment. But thank you guys for showing up and hanging out to the Wise Crowd's Liberating Structures design call. This is the fifth of these things. So we're still definitely in the prototyping phase. So we're going to be working some bugs out, but I think so far it tracks. Our intention for today is to basically give and get help and design a string of liberating structures to deal with somebody's design challenge. I really hope somebody brought a design challenge. Otherwise, we'll make one up, maybe host a meetup, who knows. At any rate, my name's Jeremy. I host stuff like this, and I'm truly geeked out about liberating structures. I propose that I toss everybody into impromptu networking just so we can make friends and loosen our lips and get into the mix. So impromptu networking, it'll just be a series of relatively short one-on-one interactions just to warm up, about 5 minutes in length. We'll go 2 or 3 rounds. The invitation that we've been test driving is, how did you discover liberating structures? And is there a desert island structure? You have one structure, if you were trapped on a desert island and you could only take one liberating structure with you, which one would it be? And also to do some thinking for later on in the session, which structure might you hope to better understand today? Is there any structure in particular that you go, I don't know if I understand this thing, or that we might be able to weave into the mix as time goes by. So now that I've explained both the structure and the invitation, I'll ask both questions at once. Does anybody have a question about the structure that we're going to use or what we're going to do? Cool. Any questions about the prompt or invitation? All right, then let me prime this little breakout room thing and make magic happen. Two rooms plus whoever is with me, which is exactly no one. All by myself. Don't wanna be. No, it's fine. I'm gonna put the timer down for 4 minutes with a 60-second kicker. So keep it snappy, guys. Oh, Sunil. Are you still getting settled in, man? Sunil, if you can hear me, I'm going to jump in with Ian, and you can hang out in this space. Oh, well, all right. I guess I bring the recording with me wherever I go. So that's what's up. Sunil's still getting set up. So he's relocating and just showing up at home. So Ian, how did you learn to love liberating structures?
I don't know that I've learned to love them yet. I think it was a couple of years ago listening to some podcasts and hearing about liberating structures that way. Ended up buying the book and finding it pretty hard going to actually understand what liberating structures are and how to use them from that.
Totally.
And over the last couple of months thinking, I really need to do this. Meetings have got really boring and repetitive, and especially things like retros at footwork, they're just pretty dire at the moment.
Yeah.
And so it's thinking we need to find ways to get more people interacting, more stuff going on. And
amen.
someone spoke, or I was talking to someone the other day about just meetings in general, and they were saying now that we've moved into the online world, it doesn't matter how many people you have in a session, there's generally 3 people who will speak and that'll be it.
Yeah.
And so the idea of these structures that we can get more involvement is something that's really appealing to me. And I'm here today hoping to learn from you bigger brains.
No, I don't know if my brain's much bigger, man, but for sure. Yeah, we'll give her a go. Let me send a message to Niels. Just a second. Let's see. Do you see that, or does that go to everybody? I wonder.
I see that.
All right.
It says to everyone, but
yeah, exactly. That's a good question mark. At any rate, my love affair with liberating structures. I like the that you bring in sharp focus. Like, oh my God, meetings are sucking the life out of me. How do we not do that? I definitely agree with that sentiment. For me, my love affair with liberating structure started when I got into agile coaching properly. I did a couple stints as a scrum master for actually a few years at a time, and then made the move into agile coaching in 2018, 2019. And this left me with like a huge box of like theoretical understanding and like a huge question mark of like, how do I actually do this in like all of these weird settings with people I don't know and who, and so I landed on liberating structures as a good how to all of my questions of how do I do this? Like one box of tools that I can basically use to accomplish all of those hows. And still rocking steady, 2 or 3 years after. So
it sounds good that it's working for you.
Yeah, it's all going according to plan. So, and do you have a desert island structure, or are we still in the infancy of our learning journey?
It's still very much the learning phases. Cool. I think the only one I've really tried using is the 1, 2, 4 rule. Mm-hmm. But we have pretty poor tools in our workspace, so you have to set up a whole bunch of dedicated Skype sessions. Ooh. And then be like, okay, now you guys go to this one and you guys go to that one.
Yeah, that's painful, so, for sure.
If they don't give you the tools, you have to waste more time, preparation and more time in the sessions, doing the moving from one place to the next.
Yeah, I can dig that.
Anyway, I think we're done.
Yeah, that was our time.
Oh.
Hey, there you guys are.
There's everyone. Hello.
Yeah, we're back. Cool. Hello. What's up, Niels? What's up, Dove?
Hi.
Back to the party. Hi. We're recording the session, so if that's not cool, fuck out of here. No, say so, and I will cancel it. It's not that important, even though I'm slightly obsessed with hoarding information and creating artifacts. We're just running through impromptu networking, getting to know everybody. You guys are now for sure at least somewhat familiar with each other. Yeah. Let me, again, drop a link to the doc that we're working with. Invitation for impromptu networking. How do I create an extra breakout room? Ooh, add room with that button. Wow, that was easy. So let's see. The invitation that we're working through just to get to know each other is, where did your love affair with liberating structure start? And is there a desert island liberating structure, one that you would take if you were trapped on a desert island with you? And as a kicker, if you can get to it, is there any structure that you would like to explore or learn more about or weave into the session today? So with that being said, a room has been added. Can I give you guys God mode so you can just place yourself in whatever room you like? Yeah, let's try that. Open all rooms. And you are free to roam about the cabin. So find a partner, make a pair, and do some impromptu networking.
Awesome.
Madeline, and I guess it's us, right?
Yes.
That sorted itself out delightfully. I'm using this every time. So, where did you bump into liberating structures?
It was quite a while ago. I can't remember exactly when. Definitely before this whole Corona and working from home time.
Cool.
There was a liberating structure was organized at Ordina, where I work, by Buddy Overhang.
Okay.
And I joined that. Yeah. But it's quite a while ago, and I joined another one. I can't remember where. And then, to be honest, the last year or so, I've been so fed up with working online that I didn't really join very many meetups or meetings, things like that, because I thought, I've really had enough. Mm-hmm. But now I thought, let's do it again, because it always inspires me and makes me happy. So, yeah.
Well, cool.
Let's do it again.
Thanks so much again, like I said, for showing up. I feel like I'm in a privileged space. I'll try to be a good custodian of your energy.
Yeah.
What's funny is that I didn't get to know liberating structures. Well, most of my learning in liberating structures actually has been with Barry and Christian. So like here in the Netherlands, they're just the dudes, right?
Yeah.
And so when did I first meet Barry? Was probably a meetup in early 2019, and it might have been an option space actually that they were hosting. And that option space was like actually the first moment that like the magic of liberating structures actually struck me. The way in which we had a small process mindfulness conversation at the beginning of the option space to decide which structure we were going to use to explore the content was just like, ooh, this is pretty cool. Like, oh, I like it. And away we go from there. And truth be told, if I had one structure that I could only use one for the rest of my life, it would probably be open space. I can make, of course, open space can do a lot of things for a lot of folks. And do you have like a favorite?
No, not really. And I also haven't used all of them. So no, there's not really a favorite. No.
Wow, me neither. So well, no pressure there.
I do have a favorite session though, with the tricks, the one that you imagine the worst thing happening and everything going wrong.
Yeah, Triz is great, huh?
Yes, that was really a nice session because something actually came out of it, and that was, which was unexpected.
At just like a random meetup.
No, it was a retrospective, a Scrum retrospective. Yeah.
Super.
And I had only just started using liberating structures, and I could see them thinking, what is this crazy woman going to do now?
Yeah, I know, right?
She's always thinking of something else, and what's this?
Exactly. I remember I had the strongest response to Triz the first time I ever used it. I had one participant that was just practically panic stricken, like, no, we can't think about these things. Like if we say them out loud, they will come out and get us. And it took a moment to like talk him back off of the ledge and go, okay, all right, so we're not going to stop the conversation here. We're then going to figure out what we can do about these things. And he was like, yeah, that's all well, huh? It was a dicey moment in the room.
Yeah.
So how great that it worked well for you, though.
Yeah, it really did. But it also always depends on the group of people you've got, right? Some of them are, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, how can I set the stage? And but yeah, for sure, personal like vibe has a lot to do with it, right?
Yeah.
I can set the stage, but if you guys want to be a bunch of dicks, then this is going to go like sideways fast. But luckily that rarely happens.
Yes,
almost
that's
never.
true. Yeah, yeah.
All right, so I hope that was cozy, gezellig, and
Yeah,
delightful. So one more time, I'm just going to open the rooms. You guys can move yourselves.
Okay, what should I have done if I wanted to?
Great.
Yeah.
So on the lower portion of your screen, you should see 4 squares that says breakout rooms. And once you click on that, it'll pop up what's-a-mahoo's-it.
I don't see that.
A little window. Oh, if you might be on an older version of Zoom, that might not be there for you.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can see it until you open the rooms.
Oh, okay.
Because I can't see it either.
Okay. So if I go like that, can you see it down there now, Madeline?
Yeah, I can see breakout rooms now.
No, I can't. No, I've probably got an older version because it's also been a while since I've used Zoom.
Okay.
I don't think I've updated it.
No worries. So Madeline, I'm just gonna park you with somebody, with Dove. There we go. Assign to room 2. Enjoy. And then you'll see a notification. Awesome. And Niels, you gonna kick it with me?
Yeah, sure.
Righteous, man.
I was
So
just lazy and picking a room.
that also works, man. That's also a self-organizational tool. So where did you get to know liberating structures?
I think it was at the conference at I think Agile Camp, where we had like 40-ish people together, and we just had different sessions on people experimenting on different ways of meeting or team building or anything, pretty much.
So like a user-generated type of party.
Yeah, exactly. So that was interesting, and I think I saw someone wearing a Liberating Structures t-shirt.
Yeah.
I think I've seen them later as well, maybe at other conferences and such. And well, that's where I thought, well, let's look it up and figure out what's it about. I've been sort of using them on and off in the past few years.
Cool. So at a party, yeah. So I've now, what's a facet of this that I can share that it'll be new for this recording as well, because it's been tracking me down. Liberating structures. Actually, I think like a lot of people. Oh, again, here you have to trade me the other side. Sorry, my son is in quarantine because his class has on the other side this one. Okay. And I'm bribing him with television to chill out. What I was going to say is, like a lot of people, I think I was familiar with liberating structures, with some structures within the toolkit of liberating structures, like before I knew liberating structures were a thing. I remember I hosted actually a half day 1-2-4-all as with 50 people as like the kickoff to an entire organizational change that, you know, the program was sort of designed by my mentor, Foucault Ketel. Shout out to Institute Core. Whoop, whoop. So he used it in this invitation that he called Clearing the Past, Seeing the Future. But I had done that pattern actually several times before I ever discovered like, oh, this is a thing. And that was probably in like 2016 that I started sort of playing around with like the basic building blocks. But it wasn't until 2018 actually when Foucault again said, "Hey Jeremy, one of our clients has recommended this book to me. I don't want to read it, but I think you'll like it, so go check it out." And you know, coincidentally, he was also the guy who convinced me to look into Scrum Mastership. So like his recommendations, which is now my job, right? More or less, agile coachy, business consultant person. So his recommendations are sage. So do you have a favorite structure, Niels?
No, not really. I used 1-2-4-all a lot, but it's also used a lot in other structures as well.
Yeah.
And it's quite basic and easy. I do know the other one, that's 25-10 solutions or something. I had a lot of fun with that one once as well.
Yes. Have you seen David Heath's online tool for 2510?
No. Did he make an online tool for that?
Yeah, he made an app, like a standalone in-browser app, just to host 2510. I'll put a link to it. What's up?
Everything is fine, and on your end, are you okay? No, what I wanted to say is you close the rooms too abruptly, and like in the 3 chats that I had, too fast and without warning. Like, why not send everyone a message, come back?
Oh, you didn't see the timer. Oh.
I did see the timer.
Even if we do it's too small and it's too fast anyway. Like every time just one person talks.
Sure. Ah, okay. So not enough time.
I saw the timer, but my impression was that the second room and the third room were shorter than the first room. I don't know.
Time dilation. I can feel that. For sure. Well, would you like some more time? Man, I can just read.
Not this one, just as a facilitator.
Okay.
And you can, by the way, and you can send a message when halftime is over, so we know what to switch, right?
Ah, yeah, for sure. I can definitely cop to being lazy and not doing that. So I felt. Thanks. So now that we're all friends, let the games begin. Let me again, if just in case not everybody has the link to the doc. Rules. So in the doc, you'll find a document. You'll find an image on like the 3rd or 4th page that has this sort of growth ladder for the liberating structures development phases. If I would like to invite you to add your development phase after your name in Zoom, just so that we can get some sense of where everybody's familiarity is. And there are some cool additional roles that we can use to activate. So like I will go Jeremy Akers, minimalist. If I can remember how to spell minimalist. Minimalist. There we go. And did anybody have any structures that came up in their conversations that they hope we might get to and unpack as we go along today? As I give you guys multiple invitations at once. Change your name and answer my question.
Well, for me, it's difficult because I've only used a few and it's a long time ago. So anything that is brought up today is good for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the long and short of why we want to be explicit about our development phase is that I have also some specific invitations to help each person at their appropriate phase take up some specific membership roles. So for those of us that are still despairing cynics and super new to liberating structures, I would invite you to use that relative, that noob status to help us challenge our assumptions and ask us hard questions about why would that work, and to won't stay to the end. Thank you, Dov. I like your transparency. So, help, if you're super new, just help us, challenge our assumptions and our orthodoxy, because otherwise we'll get stuck into groupthink. If you're a cautious optimist, then ask for clarification and explanation. Don't let us off the hook by being presumptive, and ask that we unpack all of the things the tools and methods, so that we can make sure that we are raising everybody's ship. I mixed metaphors, but I think you get it. Super users, especially answer questions you haven't answered before, and yeah, and even if it's a little on the edge, even if you're not sure it's going to stick, we're a pretty warm room. We're all friends here, so try and offer what insight you have. And for the middle of us in the room, try and shut up. I'm speaking to myself. Make space for other people to answer questions, even though I'm sure you've got an answer on the tip of your tongue, Jeremy, and then build on the input of others. So if we all take up one of these membership roles, or all of them, then we should have a super awesome, great time. And that's basically that. So I think the doc will sort of start in earnest with the wise crowds image, which is going to be our structure for today. Does anybody else want to unpack and walk us through the structure of wise crowds? All right, then I'll do it. Then I'll jump in. So wise crowds runs very similar to the pattern that is Troika. So one person will take on the role of client, and they will bring us their design brief, their help request, and they'll have a couple minutes to explain a little bit about their situation. And then the rest of us will take on the role of consultant. And the consultants, after hearing the help request, will then have some time to ask clarifying questions, but are going to hold off on giving any advice, or or the consultation will wait until after the clarifying questions have been answered. After that, the client is going to mute themselves and turn off their webcam, and us consultants are then going to offer our advice or insight or information amongst each other. And we're also going to make use of this document and the design storyboard, which you'll find underneath it. So our goal is to come up with a string of structures that they could use to address their help request. And after we sort of spar with each other and come up with a prototype of a game plan that they might be able to use, the client will come back into the call, turning on their webcam and microphone, and they'll say, "Oh, awesome, guys! I love that so much. This is going to change my day." Or they're going to say, "Ooh, I realized I asked for the wrong help, because that is not useful to me whatsoever." Or something somewhere in between, perhaps maybe both. And then if we have time, we'll move on to another help request and repeat the whole thing again, all over again. So does anybody have questions about the basic nuts and bolts? Righteous. With repetition, that one's really getting in there. So then the question is, does anybody have a help request? A design brief for us to work on?
I tried to submit one through the form on the registration, and it was disappeared into the aether.
Oh God! Oh, so, that's painful.
So I can give you one, and you can accept or reject. I don't mind. I'm working in an international education charity, and I have a bunch of different sites, and I do data and analytics and strategy. So I'm thinking about evidence-based decision-making, problem-solving 101 type of stuff. And I'm about to relaunch a data platform, a Tableau-based data platform, and a series of data conversations following on to a ransomware attack that took out technical capabilities of IT infrastructure. So everything's being restored. The system's coming back up. It's a chance to refresh a sort of 2-year development effort that went before that. And I want to build community. So I'm looking to come up with a standard set of data conversations or meetings that I can have with educators, students, staff and administrators, and possibly parents. And I'm thinking about how to invite people in my community to join in designing that series of events. And some of my challenges and obstacles include the fact that the system's been off for 6 months, so people have either forgotten it or thought to themselves, this is another one of those initiatives that comes and goes. I was resisting it before. I didn't have to resist it for 6 months, but I might just resist through the next phase as well. Another challenge is just making sure that people have time in their schedules to actually learn something new and work with their colleagues to discover insight as opposed to being defensive. And it's probably my number one obstacle is people being defensive because they think that the use of evidence in education is all about judging whether or not they are good or bad. So I'm trying to convey the message that it's not about good or bad, it's about useful, not useful, efficacy or not efficacy. So, and I think that probably gives you an idea of how things work or don't.
I'm typing furiously, multitasking. So let me run through the basics. So the place or the context, it sounds like is in the development environment of this product that had went through a sort of service outage, right? And the goal of this session it rhymes a little bit like root cause analysis to me. You want to do some bit of exploration about what happened with the outage and maybe learn some lessons.
Not so interested in what happened with the outage, more interested in building a culture of continuous improvement and learning going forward. So I had an effort that was going that was interrupted by the outage. So the outage is not something that is, it's not common in the community to know anything about that. It's a lot of teachers who will use the system to say, the things that I'm doing in my class are working, my kids are advancing, or they're satisfied. We have like various sources of data about the perspective, and part of the challenge is to take ones and zeros and mix them with things like more qualitative data like satisfaction, surveys, happiness. You've got standardized assessments that people do because they're in 4th grade or 12th grade, or they're taking IB or they're taking AP. So there's a lot of numeric and quantitative data. There's a lot of qualitative data. And historically, there hasn't been a lot of collaboration or cooperation across roles. It's a very siloed environment. So it's less about the failure than it is about growing something new, really.
So that sounds like there's a lot of information. A lot of people have different sources of information. You'd like to sort of mix those up. How do we make use of that stuff? And when I think about the purpose or outcome, like building this culture of continuous learning seems to be, that's where we're trying to go. And the participants, can you tell me a little bit more about the diversity of stakeholders as I fix the sound of Ninjago for my son?
Yeah, I would break it down into the people that are professional educators. So they're trained as teachers and they're leading classes. And then there's staff and support people that are doing learning support or athletics or things that are good for whole child development as opposed to just academic learning. And then there are the staff and administrators who make things work and make sure that the heat is on and we're accredited by the appropriate bodies and handle relationships with the parents. And then there are the parents who have their own ability to support the community and the organization, and also their own interests, you know, their needs. And it's an international environment, so probably about 75 countries and around 50 languages, something like that. So does that give you a better idea?
That gives me the basic nuts and bolts. And then, I mean, my fellow consultants, what clarifying questions might we have about David's situation?
So me, your description is too dense for me, frankly. So I have two questions. Like hearing you, it sounds like you have it all figured out. What would you like to happen? What sort of help would you like?
I would like to invite people to join in the effort, and I would not like to make them think that it's all figured out or too dense to solve. So those are two sides of the same thing. How could I have an objective that's clear enough to invite people to create that sense of collaboration and working together as opposed to staying in silos? Or let's say, how can we invent a new normal rather than trying to go back to the old normal?
Who is we?
Our community.
Okay, and another thing that I don't understand, what you describe is the problem of whom? And my follow-up question will be, do they know that it's their problem?
The problem right now is that we've lost 2 years of opportunity, and I think people are exhausted. So the problem is exhaustion. The failure of IT is a transitory thing because now IT is back and it's successful again. So it's the energy level of the community that has suffered. And you know, you can measure that by lost learning. So achievement is going down, growth is going down. So the numbers are telling you that there is an issue, but you don't want the issue to be about the worth of the individuals. You want it to be about where are we really, honestly, where are we starting?
But, and again, I really don't understand the context. So when you say community, it's a voluntary community? It's a community of people who choose to be there?
It's 4 schools, each school comprised of 12 years of learning. So from kindergartners, from 4 or 5-year-olds up till 17 or 18-year-olds. And the 4 schools are located in different locations.
Okay. And your challenge is, how do I bring them back?
How do we bring back the energy level that drives curiosity and learning, as opposed to just trying to get back to the habits that we had before the pandemic?
Okay. And if you would ask them, what would they say?
Some of them would say, let's just get back to normal. Some of them would say, this sounds interesting and exciting. And I think the challenge that I'm bringing to the group is, how might I invite people in such a way that they come with an open mind and an open answer, as opposed to, I already have too much to do. Why are you asking me to invent something that's the job of a school. You're supposed to tell us what to do.
Okay. Anyone else?
How much time might you have to host this conversation?
That's an interesting question, which is it one conversation? I think of it as a series of encounters. And I used liberating structures a little bit at the beginning of the pandemic to introduce people to the idea that this might last years, not just months. And it was very useful in calming the initial panic, but it wasn't, it did not continue as a regular series. And as a result, we've got more isolation than we had before. So I think, you know, I would like to have the community say it needs to be an ongoing thing as opposed to a single conversation. But I can't prescribe the outcome. I can say what I hope we will agree is that we would like the principle of continuous learning and a strong community, connected group of people working on similar objectives at the level of principle as opposed to habit or recipe or directions, you know, concrete instructions type of thing.
Cool. So we're on the opening salvo. Does anybody else have clarifying questions about the nature of David's case? Going once, going twice.
So lost in the whole world.
Wow.
I don't know if I've got anything from that, I'm afraid. That's
Yeah. Well, I think there's that. Then there must, by definition, be enough. All right. If there's enough to get confused, we must have more than enough. All right. Well, thanks, David. Well, we'll get to work. Put yourself on mute and turn off the webcam. We'll do some magic. I'm the most curious about this one.
I'm trying. Hang on a second. I'm trying. All right.
He's still here.
Now, why is it not?
I can mute you.
I can't see the bar. I can't.
You're muted now.
David is muted. You can't see the bottom.
And I think, Jeremy, that you can also turn off his camera.
Stop video. Ah, there we go.
There you go.
I have the power. So
don't worry about how it doesn't know how to turn it on again. But
we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. All right, so we've got a lot of information, obviously, and it sounds like it's quite a big project that he's sort of brought into this space. So I think that might be why we're swimming. Just off of the top, right? When you think about this sort of Leviathan that he's brought in, what are some structures that come to your mind that might help us at least do the initial, like, setting the stage to have this longer conversation that he brings in? Are there any structures that you think might be suitable for that?
So I was thinking about the 20% solution, something like that.
The 15% solution?
Yeah.
Even I would say 5% solution if we can.
I'm not really sure whether the problem David perceives is also perceived by his surrounding. So I'm a bit skittish on looking for a solution at this moment.
That's all right. There's a difference. So what structure might you want to use?
Well, the one that comes to mind, I don't really know whether that's a good one, is something like Ecocycle Planning, where you think out on what's the future, where are we going with whatever we're doing, looking at the happy children that leave the school as being the product in your ecocycle.
Okay. Cool. I can dig it. So let's see if I can.
If you can't, I'll grab a shovel for you.
Let's see if somebody could put. I'm sure I've got an image of the Ecocycle here on my iPad, but I don't know if I've got one on my laptop that I can. Oh, wait a minute. The doc is on it's a shared doc. I can put it here. Cool. So Ecocycle comes up, 15% solutions. Anything else?
A solution for what? So what are we searching structures for?
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about what I get from David's initial introduction is that he's trying to start a conversation really about culture change. So I think that might be part of to perhaps rationalize and normalize this sense of like, there's so much going on. What are we doing here? Like he has brought us a very large, actually quite massive assignment in this help request. So if I think about sort of undergoing this rather long journey of changing the culture around continuous improvement and trading insight and information in this education context with different people in different locations, different silos of different roles, and obviously different grades, right? So like there's an infinite number of different ways that I can see information to get stratified and lost, sort of in between the cracks. So in this context, how might we make the first salvo to change the culture?
I'll take my role as a cynic. I think that what you're doing is trying to solution too soon. What I would invite him to do before all of this is to reconsider the problem, whose problem it is what he's trying to do really suitable for the situation? Does he have any partners? Who is this ecosystem that he's talking about?
I agree.
And right?
I agree.
Yeah. So I realize this is a meetup of liberating structures, so we have to put liberating structures in the mix. But first, sit with yourself and define well enough the MVP, who is it used for, who are your users, and validate with your users that they need what you think they need. Yeah. Because not only this, because it was defined in the beginning of the pandemic, and since then there was a lot of change going on.
Yeah.
And what might be a structure that he could use to do that in a participatory fashion?
Mm-hmm.
So one that pops up specifically in response to what you're describing, Dov, is, so there was one that jumped out for me initially, and I'll park that, but just based on what your description, a structure that might be very useful to guide that discussion could be discovery action dialogue. So the discovery action dialogue, the challenge I would see with that, well, let me describe it first. Discovery action dialogue splits a larger group into smaller subgroups, as most liberating structures do. In this instance, say groups of 4 or 5 people. It asks somebody to play the role of host and offers about 7 different questions to guide the conversation. And those questions tend to be around, hey, geez, I'm looking at the actual cards, but I rarely use this.
I'll do that again as well.
Yeah, that's funny. I don't know the questions off the top of my head. So how do you know the problem is present? What do you do personally to resolve it? And I also like to contribute to whatever the problem is. Who do you know that is actually really good at solving whatever a problem state is? And what are some things that they do that we might be able to all learn from and exact? Who might need to be involved in the solution? So, I mean, the discovery action dialogue is a really, there we go, found it. It's a good pattern to really go about like understanding what information already exists to solve problem states in the environment. And it asks somebody to play the role of host, and it asks someone else to play the role of scribe to capture this discussion that basically can either happen in this very linear follow questions 1 through 7, or in a much more organic sort of emergent way as the host just goes, all right, so it looks like we've sort of answered this question. We've sort of answered that question. And again, the scribe captures. So that was my, Dov, did you find the card?
No, not at all, but I have the French version, so it's really hard to find.
Oh, added complexity. Awesome. Thanks, Ian, for dropping that one in the chat. So the questions are, how do you know when the problem is present? How do you contribute to the solution? What prevents you to do this at all time? Do you know anyone who has solved this? Do you have any ideas? What needs to be done? Any volunteers? Who else needs to be involved? So, I mean, especially from a very like grassroots. Okay. Okay, Elena filmed, yeah. Hold on. So that could be an interesting pattern to host this sort of broader discussion of like, hey, you know, what the F, and maybe test my hypothesis. Another pattern that I think is also could be very relevant, especially for this more for this checksum, could also be something along the lines of conversation cafe. That one also jumps out to me. Are there any other patterns that when we're talking about sort of checking our assumptions and what is on? So, well, checking our assumptions. This has got real interest, real multitasking, real fast.
Yeah.
How might we be able to do that? I don't know. Maybe I should just shut up. Let me try that. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is David the only person who's really feeling an urge to make big changes, or are there other people involved as well? What do they feel are the issues that need to be addressed? And then there was this 2510 crowdsourcing. It's one of the very few that I know of and have seen videos of in action, where you have the different people going around sharing ideas and voting up ideas in a few rounds to see what is the most pressing ideas or most pressing problems for people. So could that be a way of trying to find out what else other people are interested in and what they would need from any changes to his system?
That was Dov's favorite liberating structure, right?
Yeah, because it's great. One thought that I had is not it's not a question, but it is a thought. From my experience, the more responsibility you take on something, the less the people you work with will. And it seems that he takes a lot of responsibility, which it doesn't surprise me that the others have a little enthusiasm, from what I understood. So that's one point for, food for thought.
Yeah.
Are we okay? Jeremy, when does the time end?
When I say so.
Okay, good enough.
No, I mean, so it sounds like we've got this sort of question that is sort of looming large for this group right now, which is sort of, how do we know that a sort of problem is actually present and recognized, especially for the participants? And how might we be able to sort of really lean into this space of like amplifying their agency and their responsibility to address that? And there's a laundry list of different structures that we've already sort of got on the table. So if we think about this as, let's just say validation is our first goal in order to do anything, like check and see if we can validate that people recognize there are a problem and see who is sort of willing to raise their hand to do something about it. Or, if people, to find the subgroup that says, go fuck off, we've got this, everything's fine, leave me alone. So of the laundry list of structures, 15% solution, I notice, so we didn't unpack a couple of these things. So I'd like to just make sure that we're all sort of in a shared understanding space. Dov, could you unpack 15% solutions for those of us who may be still in this newbie stage?
From what I remember, it's the question, what do we have to do to solve 15% of the problem?
Boom shakalaka. So to sort of break us out of this grand architecture type thinking for a huge solution and start thinking about, what's a baby step? What is within my authority and within my power, with no extra resources or no extra time right here and now. So the metaphor I love for 15% solutions is like, have you ever known anybody who was like really poor and still was like an amazing cook? Like there's just bare cupboards and somehow puts together a feast of stone soup. Like that's the type of thinking I want to activate with 15% solutions. Ecocycle planning is a bit of a big one. Does anybody want to jump in and unpack it for us? All right. So ecocycle planning, so there's the eco cycle. Let's just start there. Gestation or renewal, birth, maturity, and death, or creative destruction. Call it what you want. The circle of life, but put into this format of the lemniscate, the infinity. So a continuous cycle that just goes over and over and over again. What we would invite people to do is say, take a look at all of the things that, that happen in the learning journey of a child, for example, and make a laundry list of all of the things. What do kids do? Or what do we do with kids? Just make a look of all of the things and then plot them where you think they go on the eco cycle. And thinking about that that way of thinking about, so this is an activity. Is this activity actually, is it creating value? Share screen or allow us.
Well, when you talk audiovisual, why not? I tried to share my screen, but you're the only one who's allowed.
I am the only God here. I can give you co-host rights. I'm down with that. Because I notice I always get so overwhelmed. Make co-host. Boom. Boom. You're in there. Dov, you should be good to share it.
Yeah, just while you're speaking, this is much easier, no?
Super. That's radical. Thanks so much. So renewal is this stage of starting off new ideas. These new ideas obviously need a lot more effort to become anything viable. And but at some point you put then time and energy and they move into birth. They still need more time and energy, more effort to actually produce value. And that is that phase of maturity, right? Think of your crop at harvest. We've sweat, we've toiled all summer long, and now it is bearing fruit. And then at the end of your growing season, you have a moment of creative destruction, when you're literally, mowing down your fields to harvest your grain, so to speak, and planting your fallow or your cover crops. And there are these traps on the extremes, though, that you'll notice that when new ideas in renewal don't have the energy or the time invested in them, they fall into that poverty trap. I got this great idea. It could change the world, make me rich, solve cancer, end world hunger, create world peace, but I don't put any time and energy into it. It's stuck in a poverty trap. I don't have the resources it needs. And on the flip side, there are rigidity traps. So there are some ideas, there are some initiatives, there are some things that we do that are actually valuable. They are creating value, but we get sort of stuck within that value that is created. And even though new things might be able to do the job better. So these are sort of the golden handcuffs that exist in the world that, hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But what if we did break it? What if we just threw it under the bus and smashed it all up and created space for new ideas and new energy to fill up that a small tangent example, I think this was the big problem of the global financial crisis in 2008, is that very few financial institutions died. And so we now have these zombie financial institutions sort of roaming the earth on state support and Federal Reserve backing. Whereas if they would have died, sure, we may have had a big bout of chaos, but we would also create space for something new and innovative, perhaps, to show up in their space. So by plotting activities on this eco-cycle, it can help us recognize, hey, what are some ideas that are maybe in there, or some new initiatives, or some stuff that's happening that's stuck in the poverty trap, and what's some stuff that's happening that might be stuck or gunked up in these rigidity traps. Thanks for hanging out, Dove. See you around. So by and large, it's just a really interesting way to sort of spread your thoughts out over in this very living manner and think about how we can get some more flow and motion in this space. And it could be a very interesting space to start. Discovery, action, dialogue, as I think about it, might be challenging because because we might be in especially a nascent space, but I'm not sure. But first, to unpack Conversation Cafe, Niels, can you share with us what you know about Conversation Cafe? So I put you on the spot.
Yeah, you did, but I did that one. You know I did that. That's it. Mm-hmm. Conversation Cafe is, well, the way I use it is usually based on a question. So, for instance, what's the best way to solve my problem, or stuff like that. And you just pose your question and break up the group in breakout rooms of 4 or 5-ish. They take like 5 minutes to introduce themselves. Then each person takes 1 minute to explain their thoughts on it. Usually you use something like a talking stick to guide the one person, that there's only one person speaking during that minute. Then each person gets another 1 minute after that to respond to everything they've heard. Then you have an open discussion of about 20-ish minutes, and you stop the breakout room. Oh, wait. At the end of the breakout room, everyone takes 1 minute to explain what they are taking home from the session. And then you stop the breakout rooms and you have a small conversation on how did it go and does anyone want to share, so that you can end it as a group as well. That's it.
Word. Throw a question into the group, work the circles, have an open-ended discussion, and see what everybody wants to take home.
Yeah,
that tracks. So that's a pattern that I think is especially useful for squishy spaces. I could also see something like, in this instance, a repetition of conversation cafes. Nora Bateson does something called the Warm Data Lab, which is much more unstructured, but a sort of world cafe could also be very interesting, where you throw people into these conversation cafes to just sort of discuss, hey, now that, maybe the world is coming back more or less to normal, where are we at now? What's alive for you? And just sort of mixing up and hearing stories from multiple people's perspective, and then going to share your own stories and share their stories with other people and hear more could be really fertile. And last but not least, in the structures that we haven't discussed explicitly, is 2510's crowdsourcing. And who talked about 2510?
I think it was me as well. it's you give everyone a card and you let them write the idea on one side of the card, and then they take a minute to exchange cards, so they get a random one, and they read the idea that's been written on the card and rate it on the back side from 0 to 5, and then they started changing again and rating it again, and you do that around like 4 or 5-ish times. Depends a bit also on how many people are there and what the energy in the room is. And then everyone has this random card with a rating, a set of ratings on the back. So you let everyone stand in a line with the person with the highest value, highest sum value, so the highest rated one at one end and the lowest at the other end. And you just take the 5 or 3 ideas from the high end and you use them to solve your problem.
Word. And what I love about it so much is that it is by far and away the most elegant form of collective decision-making I've ever seen, because at the same time, everybody in the room is responsible for having made that choice. While no one in the room is also responsible for having made that choice. It's just, well, this is what we came up with together. So both cover and anonymity, and yet decisiveness, because it's numbers, it's math, people. As we describe this one, I think this could be a real good starting space, just to have people, describe their current view of the situation, and then, to what extent do I agree with the view of the situation that's been handed to me, could very quickly allow us to sort of upregulate. These are the views that are the most widely recognized across everybody in the room. So that could instantly ground us in, this is what we decide, this is what we know to be true. And it's a very fast structure. David Heath from the London Liberating Structures user group designed an app I was mentioning to somebody that can also make this happen online, which I can find a link for. Mm-hmm. So if we could instantly, rapidly crush it in this goal of, this is what we know to be true, what might be the next follow-up to that in this list of structures that we've offered?
So based on 2510, you have this set of solutions or a set of problems, right?
Well, we could. I think in this instance, since we may have a plurality of people, what we may have is, say, 3 statements that are widely agreed upon about the nature of the current setting, right? So let's just say that we went with that, and that we created a quick temperature check of, hey, many people in this room recognize that this is true, and this is true, and this is true. This is how I see it. This is how this person sees it, and this is how this person sees it. And these are broadly held perspectives. If we had that as a grounding to work from of, hey, this is what we think is true. On one hand, I go, well, it's really hard to plan for that conversation because it kind of depends on what is believed to be true about the present reality. Like if as a result of this, the perspective that is most widely held is everything is awesome, then something very problem-y focused wouldn't really do the trick. So maybe as a result of that, Ecocycle could be a particularly interesting space to sort of a sort of agnostic, hey, if you think things are business as usual is cool, if you think a radical redesign needs to happen, let's still get all of the activities that are sort of ongoing in this ecosystem, and let's take a look at just, sort of map them out on this ecocycle. But any other ideas?
I'm not entirely sure, but because there are all these different roles and maybe what I need from you. I don't know, that's something that if we've got 3 main things to work on, but they're all going to be different roles or different, the teachers, the administrators, the parents, the support group, and then maybe discuss for these points what they need from each other. That's why I thought of this one.
That could really track, right? Especially regardless of what the evaluation of the current weather report is. Like, I'm sure like I as administrator will need something from you, educator, right? Cool. So what I need from you is Madeline, could you want to unpack that one for us?
Well, that would only mean I'm reading from the screen.
That's great. Then we know for sure you'll stick the landing.
Yeah, well, that's difficult. There are a number of participants from different functions, different disciplines. So that's what he mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to find a way for them to get into conversation with each other, and so
so maybe if you just start with the sequence of steps.
Okay, that's explaining the process. The request must be clear and specific. They should be able to answer. Oh, I think I've even done this maybe once. The answer should be able to be answered with yes, no, or I will try, and whatever. The requests, what I need from you is, and then, I'm not saying it right, am I?
No, that's all right. Let me help you out.
Yeah.
So what I need from you, it's very interesting to use this one as a very practical tool. So let's just make this division that David brought in for us of 3 different parties, right? Educators, support staff, and administrators, right? So in these 3 different subgroups, the educators would gather with the educators, and the support staff with the support staff, and the administrators with the administrators. And they would gather together to come up with 2 specific requests for each of the other 3 groups. So educators would say, what we really need from support staff is this and this. What we really need from administrators is this and this. And like Madeline was saying, these requests should be formulated as simple thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, I want cookies. May I have cookies from you, right? You can simply say yes to that or no to that.
Yeah.
And then we come together after we have been apart. We come together and we say, hey, so, all right, these are our requests of you guys, and you trade requests. And then the emissaries, so not the entire group, that would seem like a gang war for, bringing the entire mobs together. But emissaries from each of these subgroups come together, trade requests, and then go back to their subgroup and go, hey, this is what everybody else asked of us. What do we think about that? Administrators want, or support staff wants these 2 things from us, and administrators want these 2 things with us. We want to respond in one of 4 ways. We want to say, yes, thumbs up, we've got that, you can get it. thumbs down, boo, no, not going to happen. We'll try, or whatever. And whatever is really I don't really know what you mean when you ask me for this. Like it just doesn't have enough body or concreteness. It's a little too fuzzy for me to even say yes or no, or I'll try to. And what's nice about what I need from you is the format sort of encourages us not to explain our decision-making criteria, but just be very clear and unambiguous about our responses. And then these representatives would, again, trade responses and take those back to the group. And ideally, you'd do some form of debrief. You'd describe, hey, this is what we asked for, and this is our response. What are the implications of this? Is there some, what are we going to do with this information? Oh, yay, all of our dreams can come true. Then we can start planning additional action. Or we need to send a liaison to make these things happen, right? How are we going to receive these resources? Or on the flip side, this thing that we thought was make or break isn't going to happen. Can we even proceed? What makes sense now? So yeah, that's the basic pattern of what I need from you. And in this instance, since you do sort of have these clearly defined user groups, I think it's a great strategy. As you describe this one as well, another thing that comes to my mind is social network webbing. Social network webbing is what I would call it's one of the more organic, emergent, and messy structures, especially at scale. Social network webbing asks us to draw a network graph or the web of relationships to visualize it. So place yourself on a map and draw a connecting line with the people you interact with most. To literally visualize the network topology that is maybe these clearly defined groups, or literally the physical, the psycho-spiritual, physical, relational network amongst a school, or this network of schools, for example. And then after you've sort of visualized it, you take a step back and go, okay, what patterns do we notice emerge here? Who do we think should be talking to each other that isn't talking to each other, right? It's especially at scale, it creates a very interesting artifact, which is then a tool that you can use for further conversations. For social network webbing, there's what is it? I think SumApp is the name of the tool that I would highly encourage people to use. It's definitely much more polished and professional, but then it creates an artifact that you genuinely will want to reuse because it's so visually appealing and sort of like fascinating to sort of crawl through. Whereas when I've done them previously on something like Miro, then I end up with something that's like so often so ugly that it's like almost horrifying. But social network webbing could also be a very interesting exercise given the nature of this challenge and people being in silos. I think looking at these two structures and in addition to 2510 and an Ecocycle definitely gives me something that like, there's a really, really interesting participatory and also non-judgmental program that is like, hey, however you think things are, look, there's probably some work to do, right? I don't need to say, oh, it's shit and shove that perspective down your throat. We got to do something different. But I definitely give you very organic, very tools at scale to create artifacts of discussion and to really talk about, really get information on the table that may be needed. So seeing as we've been working on this thing and I've got to go pick up my daughter soon, David, why don't you jump back into the mix and tell us what you might take away from this conversation? And maybe that problem of me turning off your video is now salient. Go back into.
I can talk, but I can't be seen.
Hold on, let me ask to start video. That'll give you a prompt.
I'm trying, but I'm saying that you can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, you're back again.
Well,
The thing is, thank you very much for engaging with such a nebulous and abstract problem. I kind of have the, what you always learn from these experiences is what's been said and what hasn't been said. And what's obvious to one person is not obvious to everyone. So that's a good point about communicating. And in fact, one of the things about what I need from you is one of the main purposes it has served for me is to say, can you ask a question that can be answered? And so I think that is a particularly useful exercise. I've usually found it useful when everyone agreed on what we're trying to do. And then we're saying, what do I need from you in order for us to succeed together? So I like the idea of that. Conversation Cafe, I think impromptu networking and Conversation Cafe work well. You make an intimate connection that's trusting, and then the Conversation Cafe can bring out the topics that need to be talked about. And I think the idea of framing things as a problem to be solved as opposed to an opportunity to be realized is one interesting issue in me setting up the story of what I'm trying to do. So like having an open mind about how to construct that and making it easy for people to volunteer for something positive or something critical. But I didn't talk about symptoms or, actual things that people are in general agreement that there's anxiety about or worry about that. And I don't know how to get that into the story in a way that's constructive. So if I say, surveys indicate that there's an issue about emotional well-being or enrollments are going down or any kind of, EKG type of statistic that is something that might worry people, or some opportunity in a given market where there's an opportunity for something to happen because of other schools closing down or there being some sort of global event that is important in that context. So discovery, action, dialogue, I'm quite interested in. I don't know a lot about that, but what I think is good in that is getting people to, and I feel like those three, impromptu networking, Conversation Cafe, and the DAD, help to articulate what the problem is, because if we don't let that come from the bottom of the organization and the community, it's not going to come from the top, because there's a vested interest in having things be like they are. There's a certain amount of complacency unless there's a crisis. So you're going to have a better chance of realizing an opportunity when you're listening to the community's perception. So getting the community out from under the hierarchy so that they can speak with the true voice is a goal of the organization of activities like this. Find the volunteers. Who wants to do this? Why do I think that I know what the problem is? Those are all good feedback. I think that I do the Ecocycle and I'm asking myself, which things are in the poverty trap and which things are in the rigidity trap? Which things are we doing out of habit? And we've kind of forgotten why we're doing them. But whatever question, I think that's really, something to think about. It's whatever means, I don't know what you're talking about. So I was really getting that from the group at the beginning of the conversation, like whatever, you haven't told us enough to work with. But you gradually did get enough to work with because you tried to imagine it a little bit more. Social network webbing, I don't know anything about. 2510, I've used a bit. My actual biggest challenge is going to be to get people to devote 45 minutes or an hour to having a conversation. And so I need to figure that's the nut that I need to figure out. Whichever of the structures that I apply to the situation, I think it can be fun. It can be trust building and positive and generate enthusiasm for potential. And I don't feel in any way negative or despairing about the situation. I just feel an opportunity at the end of the pandemic, if there ever is an end to the pandemic, but I feel like there's an opportunity to reinvent normal and we should try to take it. And then and the last thing I was going to say is getting to a question that can be answered. Maybe also, nobody really talked about students. And I feel like students are the richest source that I have, because they don't remember what it was like. You know, the youngest ones don't remember what it was like before the people were wearing masks. And they don't have a sense of sadness. One of the things that I've noticed in looking at mental well-being and surveys is that the older the students, the more feeling of depression and sadness there is. And it's because they had expectations that aren't being met. They don't get to go to you know, Nepal, or they don't get to go to China, or they don't have their prom, or the things that they were expecting to do as a group, go to Scotland for the weekend and get crazy. They're not getting to do that stuff, and they feel sad about it. And you can look at the grades of students, and happiness goes, you know, up as it goes down as your grade gets higher. And I think to some extent, maybe adults are, you know, also living that same reality. So that's a place where I feel like, okay, there's an opportunity there for people to say what they need. So if you're right about what I need from you, that the opportunity is to be happy, you know, to discover that again in a way that resembles the happiness we thought we knew before. So I'll just close by saying thank you. That's it's kind of fearsome and scary to sit there and realize how opaque the description that I've given you appears to be. And it's like, what's to lose is learning that, you know. So it can be painful, but it's still worth it.
Yeah. I would really, yep. I'm curious, David, as you continue to go and explore, right, at some point. Yeah, so the most important thing out of what you just said for me is this question of invitation, right? That's what really jumps out. It's like, how can you craft like the most rock solid invitation that speaks to aspiration and desire and gets people to want to engage in the process, right? And then from there, like, I think everything's sort of rosy. There's the beginning of something pretty awesome. So thanks for bringing us a big, hairy, like wildly ambitious, like normally we've been talking about like, just like, oh, I got a meeting where we're going to do this. And this is here we really wrestled with something that is sort of Leviathan in scale. So awesome. Hopefully you, on a scale of 1 to 5, how have everybody in terms of participants been? Has this been a good use of time? Or 1 being like low, 5 being, yes, life affirmative, I learned something new. Just use your fingers in 3, 2, 1. Let me see them. Oh, bang. Awesome, guys. Well, this has been the Wise Crowds Liberating Structures design call. There's a whole bunch of links. In the doc is that link to the 2510 tool programmed by David Heath. So check it out and see if you can make use of that for your remote working lives. I thank you guys very much for your time, attention, and energy. I gotta go pick up my daughter, and hopefully I'll see you guys at the next one next week.
Thank you for organizing and for facilitating and all your input.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Well, my name is Jeremy Akers, Jeremy Nathaniel Akers. This has been a thing, and thanks for hanging out. Gushes.